Greg, these tariffs on Australian barley into China, what do you make of this? Is it direct retaliation for leading the charge on an investigation into COVID-19?
It certainly is, Kieran. As well as that, it's a sign of growing Beijing displeasure at a series of Australian policy positions, you know, preventing Huawei going into 5G, not ratifying the extradition treaty, foreign interference laws. The Australian governments under the last several prime ministers have refused to bend to China's will, and that's built up a lot of ill will. Certainly, though, this is a bit disturbing today. I thought the extremely aggressive rhetoric from the ambassador is disturbing. It harks back to the Cold War. It has a juvenile quality about it, a silly quality. It's not meant to persuade anybody. It's just meant to intimidate them. And I think we can probably expect a few more trade measures in the near future. Beijing has plainly decided to teach Australia a lesson. I think Australia has to respond by being, low key and firm, but not retreating on any of its positions.
It's interesting though, because you've got this reaction at the WHO where the president says this is the Chinese president saying they've been constructive, transparent, open, committing $3 billion to the investigation. So, the pretense of cooperation, at least here, there's this rhetoric and this very fierce statement from the Chinese ambassador. It seems at odds with the message they were trying to send out of Geneva.
Well, you're right, Kieran, but I think Beijing, for some time now, you might even say for some years, has been simultaneously producing a strategy of intimidation and potential rewards if you cooperate. So Beijing says to interlocutors, tremble and obey or we will hurt you. But if you tremble and obey, we will reward you. So the two sides of Chinese diplomacy, unreasonably aggressive and emollient simultaneously. That's not contradictory. The problem is, though, or rather it is contradictory, but it's not unusual. The problem is, though, you can no longer put any credit in anything the Beijing government says. Xi Jinping famously said he wasn't going to militarise the South China Sea and then produced to militarise them at a rapid rate. It is kind of laughable, to quote the ambassador, a joke for Xi Jinping to say that China has always been transparent about the coronavirus. There was clearly a period where Beijing knew the virus was infective and didn't tell the rest of the world, which delayed everyone's response. At the same time, Beijing was going around the world buying up precious, supplies of personal protective equipment at a time when it wasn't telling the rest of the world that this disease was infectious and spreading rapidly within China itself. But to come back to the World Health Assembly motion, which they'll probably pass, the motion is a little different from what Australia proposed, so you can't claim that Canberra got everything it wanted. But it's a very good win for Australia nonetheless. The motion says there's going to be an impartial and independent inquiry. It doesn't say it will be conducted by the WHO. It doesn't say it won't be conducted by the WHO. But the implication is that it will have some independence from the WHO. Now, to get that result in the face of fierce opposition from Beijing, which wants no scrutiny at all because its performance was so bad, that's a very big win for Canberra. But it's right for Canberra not to sort of, lord it over the Chinese or anything. I mean, it's a big win for common sense. The reason Beijing has gone along with it in the end was because it was just so bizarre and unreasonable to argue that you shouldn't have an inquiry into the greatest, most deadly pandemic the world has seen in decades.
And sometimes, I guess, the analysis goes to, and understandably, because the gravity of the major powers, dictates where most of the coverage goes. But in this case, this was middle power diplomacy, wasn't it? More than 100 countries co-sponsoring it.
It was. So it was originated by Australia. And I think the critics of the Morrison government are absurd. I I like and admire Joel Fitzgibbon, but when he says the Morrison government has mismanaged the relationship with China, just exactly what was it that they did wrong? Proposing this inquiry was an act of leadership by the Morrison government at a time when neither the United States nor Beijing was offering any leadership at all. Our allies fairly quickly came on board, New Zealand and Britain, but the next key thing was for the whole of the European Union to decide unanimously to go along with the Australian suggestion. And then after that, the internal debate within any country was just overwhelming. How could you not want such an inquiry? So this is an example where the superpowers were missing for different reasons. Beijing, because it has so much to hide. The United States, because it, is in a mood where it doesn't want to do multilateral things and it despises the WHO and so forth. So this was very effective leadership from the Morrison government. Probably it's wise now for the Morrison government to say, as Maurice Payne did, this is a win for the international community. I mean, we don't want to score a win for Canberra and a loss for Beijing. It's right for Canberra not to escalate the rhetoric here, even to engage in the pretense that the trade actions against us are not related to the coronavirus controversy. So it's absolutely right for the Morrison government to be low key now, but this certainly was effective middle power leadership. And, the critics of Australian foreign policy are always calling out for Australian leadership. And then when a government provides it, they get upset about that too.
We've got less than 6 months until the presidential election in the United States. Believe it or not, it's come around very quickly. But for those of us who, have half an eye on it, Greg, fill in the gaps here as to what Donald Trump and his critique of Barack Obama has got to do with 2020 and his re-election bid.
Well, the election is a very interesting point. Joe Biden is a little bit ahead, but not very much, just a few points ahead, much less ahead than Hillary Clinton was at the same point in the cycle 4 years ago. And he's sort of hiding out in his basement, and that's probably where he's most effective. The least he's seen, the better his numbers are. Now, Obama has been attacking Trump. Trump is going to tag Biden with the Obama legacy. And Obama was a very effective vote winner for himself. He hasn't been very effective for anyone else. But although Trump makes a lot of the forces against him, I do think Trump has more than half a case to make against the Obama administration, of which Biden was a central part, in the way the intelligence agencies went after his campaign. So Jim Clapper, the former director of national intelligence, who absolutely despises Trump and regards him as the devil incarnate, has declared in congressional testimony that there was just never any evidence of improper collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Yet these investigations were going on into the Trump administration in the last days, into the Trump campaign, in the last days of the Obama administration. And then senior figures in the Obama administration, including Joe Biden, wanted to see raw intelligence regarding General Flynn, who was Trump's nominee to be National Security Advisor. Now, it turns out Flynn did absolutely nothing wrong with the Russians. The FBI subsequently entrapped him into a perjury trap where they questioned him about a phone call he had with the Russians, advised him he didn't need a lawyer, and then because his recollection of that phone call was at variance with their secret recording of the phone call, they slapped him with a perjury charge, drove him to penury, and threatened to, label ridiculous charges against his son. Now, it seems to me all this is a lot of detail for any normal person to follow, but there is certainly a better case that the Obama administration behaved badly towards Trump than there is that Trump colluded with the Russians. Trump says a lot of stupid and weird things, but not everything he says is stupid and weird. And I think he's going to ramp this up and run with it a long way. And it does go to Biden's fitness to be president, because it seems like the intelligence agencies hated Trump as most people in the establishment did. And it seems like they acted very improperly towards him in order to produce a political outcome.
And we know he can campaign, and as you said, it's closer now than what it was with Hillary in that election year. So who knows how the year unfolds. Thank you, Greg Sheridan. I appreciate your insights as always.